Chippewa Valley Community Television and the City of Eau Claire present the Eau Claire Redevelopment Authority meeting.
The audio for this program can be heard on WRFP LP 101.9 FM.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And before we get into the agenda items, I want to thank Janine for her handling the last meeting. I'm a little concerned at how long it took. We'll work with her to move things along. And because we are on television now, when you do talk, try to hit your mic or keep it on. If you do keep it on, keep your comments quiet, if you would. Okay, minutes for the meeting of April 20th, 2016. It's in your packet. I know everyone has read it. Any questions or concerns? If not, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. They are passed. Financial statements. Cal?
Good morning. Your operating expenses for the month of April totaled $910 and included $350 for an audit for the WEDC SAG grant, which was the final payment for that. $9 in postage and $551 for utilities in the Cannery Redevelopment District. Your acquisition expenses totaled $50 and it was for a moving estimate for Silver Mine Stone Company.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the financial statements as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve financials as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. They are approved. Number 4, update on the health assessment impact study in the Cannery District. Michael?
Yep, Audrey is here.
Okay. Very good.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having us both here. My name's Audrey Berner. I'm a project manager with the Eau Claire City County Health Department.
And I'm Nick Zupan, Population Health Service Fellow with the Eau Claire City Health Department and also the Division of Public Health.
So we're both on the project team for the health impact assessment of the Cannery District, and many moons ago, August, we were back, I was here with one of my other project team members to talk about the health impact assessment. So it's been about 7 or 8 months, and we thought we'd give a brief update on what we've been doing since then. Just as a quick reminder, the health impact assessment came out of the health chapter of the comp plan, which recommended piloting health impact assessment on private or public developments here in Eau Claire. So because of the timing of the health chapter and the Cannery redevelopment, those two projects sort of fell in line with each other. So far, people that are involved include the Health Department, Mayo Clinic Health System, also the City of Eau Claire. Mr. Ned Noel is the city planner who's on our project team, and Jonah, and then also Eau Claire Healthy Communities. So that group makes up our core team. And we've met with Mr. Schatz for the last couple of months off and on to give updates as we go along the way. And hopefully all of you remember Mr. Klinkhammer is our RDA representative to one of our advisory committees as well. So he's been involved over the last couple of months. What we've been doing since August, we had a training with Health Impact Assessment Technical Advisors from Georgia Public Health, Georgia Health Policy Center. They came here to Eau Claire for a couple of days and gave a training in February to leaders, also community members, residents, business owners in the West River side to talk about what is health impact assessment, and also start to talk about, out of the 100 different health topics we could focus on for a health impact assessment, what are some that are most relevant to Eau Claire. So we took information from that training in February. We did some community engagement in April where we spent time with business owners, community members, residents in the West River side, and just asked them, well, what are some health concerns that you might have in your neighborhood in general, and what are some things you might see as health benefits that could come out of the Cannery Redevelopment District? So something that really is just meant to supplement some of the community engagement that the city has already done to focus more on health as we look at the health impact assessment specifically. And then earlier this month, we have 2 advisory committees, one that's made up of neighborhood residents and one that's made up of of other stakeholders from around the city who don't specifically live or work in the West Riverside neighborhood. They met at the beginning of May, and they looked at all the topics that we could evaluate for health impact assessment and narrowed it down to 5. And those 5 topics were safety and crime, social cohesion, trails and transit, housing development, and accessibility. So those will be the 5 topics that we look at specifically as we're moving forward with the HIA. Nick will talk about some of those forward steps that are coming up.
So as we move forward with the process, what we're going to do is we're going to work with the advisory committees again and come up with questions we really want to know about specific to those 5 scoping topics. And so what we'll do is we'll take those questions, and then the core HIA team will do some research, some digging, and we'll look at what other communities have done related to those topics and to those questions. And then what we are going to do is form recommendations based on what we have found from other communities, best practices, that kind of thing. And we will make those recommendations for the Cannery District redevelopment as that process moves forward. And these recommendations really are just a tool, a resource that the redevelopment can use if necessary, but also they're just there as an additional tool, not really something that has to be implemented or something like that. So that's kind of the process where we're at and where we're going. So now we're going to open it up to questions from any of you.
Questions, anyone? Is Dave doing a good job?
He's doing a great job.
Notice I didn't turn my mic on for that. Let me ask a question on one of your topics, is safety and crime. When something pops up like that, specifically crime, are you bringing in experts from the city police department to advise you?
Yeah, we have the beat officer, Mr. Corey Streeter, who is on our neighborhood advisory committee. So he was at the meeting where the group selected that topic, and he'll be a really valuable resource as we go forward.
Okay. There's no further questions. Thanks very much. We'll look forward to another update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 5, consideration of a 30-day extension from William Glass, the Brewing Project at 1807 Oxford. Excuse me, Dave.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just deeply disappointed that I wasn't going to make that presentation. I saw it on the agenda. I thought it was going to be me. So I boned up for 3 days on this.
If only we had the time, Dave, to give you that hour and a half you need. But thank you anyway. Back to item number 5, the consideration of a 30-day extension from William Glass, the Brewing Project for 1807 Oxford Avenue in the Cannery District. And I see Mr. Glass here, and he'd like to address the board.
Yes, he would. Just a brief summary. This board had given Mr. Glass a 90-day right to negotiate with a development agreement. He's been working on it. We've had lots of different contractors there. He's been gathering his data for the expenses and the costs and such. So it took the full 90 days to do that, so he needs another 30-day extension so that we can work towards the development agreement. But he's here to make an update and a presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Again, William Glass from the Brewing Project. As Mike said, it did take longer than expected. I think had we been looking at a vacant lot of land, it wouldn't have taken so long, but given the fact that it was spring break right when we got the right to negotiate, we just couldn't get anybody in. That kind of slowed things down. That said, I wanted to give you some information. We actually just got our numbers back from Market and Johnson last week as to what our budget is and what we're looking at, and we would like to move forward with an offer to purchase the property. So I've got just a little presentation to kind of give you a rundown, give you some more information so that you have that knowledge going into making this 30-day extension decision. Perfect. All right. So we're looking at a $3 million investment in the first 3 years. The whole goal is the rehabilitation of the blighted property that sits there. As I mentioned before, when I was here, the creation of a destination brewery in downtown Eau Claire. We're looking to create 5 to 10 new jobs in the first year. As soon as we can increase our capacity, we're looking to hire on. We're actually hiring another full-time person next week. And then within the first 3 years, we're looking at 20 to 30 new jobs as well. We've kind of laid it out, this construction plan in phases from 0 to possibly 4. 0, not a number, but that's how they laid it out for me. So phase 0 would be as soon as we could close on the building, on the property, we would immediately upgrade all of the HVAC systems, get the existing walk-in cooler up and running, and then really the most important thing to me is that third one is sealing the property off from the elements and worse. I don't know if anybody's actually physically been in the building, but despite the fact that there is a key to lock the door, you don't need a key to get in that building. There are holes big enough that you could probably walk through with a backpack and a golf bag and your luggage. It is what it is, but what we'd like to do is go in and really seal it off, put a new roof on parts of the building just to keep the water out, just seal it up. That's my biggest concern with the property as it sits today, is the access that anyone would have to it, as well as the fact that there is water getting in. And then as well in that phase 0, we'd be removing the debris that was left on the property that's on the riverside. There's, I don't even know, but we got a quote of about $40,000 to remove all of the stuff that was left by Silvermine. Phase 1 would be us moving from our existing space, moving the brew house and all of our equipment into what is the original warehouse structure that's on the north side of it's kind of the middle north of the building. Basically getting up and running again. The worst thing that we can do is be out of commission for a couple of months. So the idea is that we would get in, get the floors fixed up, add some floor drains, and then move our equipment across the street into this new space. Because the cooler would already be running, we'd be able to start transferring product over there and making things happen relatively quickly. Then we'd construct firewalls to seal off the space that I just mentioned from the space that we'd be looking to tear down. I don't have it built into this slideshow, but we'd be looking at removing about half of the building, and it's the part that's in between the original 3-story structure and the ground level warehouse that we'd be moving into right away. In phase 1 as well, we'd be looking to make aesthetic improvements to the northern warehouse space. That's the kind of less than pleasing red cinder block structure on the north end of the property. Phase 2, now this is once the brewery has gone back into production, once we've hit full swing, and we can kind of take our focus off just being open and running. We'd look at demoing the old cold storage, which is the section in between the north and the south half, or the north and the south parts that we would end up building up the new space. We'd also demo the old retail and office space, which is the southwest corner of the property, and that's also where there's the easement issue, or I think I'm saying that correct, as well as the demo of what we call the shanty town that's on the riverside. It's just some old tin structure that was thrown up to protect something from the elements, but it's all kind of falling in on itself, and it's just bad. As well as the conclusion of phase 2 would be the construction of a 7,000 square foot brewing space in the public room, which would be the new structure that you've probably seen. Phase 3 would be the removal of the second floor in the original structure, which is a 3-story building, and then the rehabilitation of that structure into a tasting room, potentially a restaurant space, and an event space. So our idea is that we would open it up to have kind of a public house, somewhere where people can come in, try the beers. At some point, if we look at having a restaurant partner come in, that would be also restaurant space. We'd have riverside seating right up next to the bike trail there. But then the third floor would be open as well during the day for the public, but it would be able to be rented out for things like wedding receptions, gatherings, other things where people need to gather a group of people and they want to be in a cool space that they can have a great view of the river. As well as with that, we're looking at putting about a 2,500 square foot deck that would be 3 stories off of the river right out there. So that would be pretty nice. You can actually see all the way down to the dam and through to Phoenix Park. So great views all the way around. As well in phase 3, we're looking at, I believe I mentioned it when we originally asked for the right to negotiate, we were looking at coffee roasting. We're also looking at adding a distillery. Kind of diversifying the business and looking at making all sorts of things that people like to drink. I guess one of the things we've discussed is we want to make this the best smelling building in Eau Claire. And we'll just have to add a bakery at some point too. So then phase 4 and what we look at as a contingency, so this would be somewhere in the 5-year range after all the new construction is done on the parts of the building that we're looking to rehab. We would look at removing the northern warehouse space, which is that less than pleasing portion, and then construction of a new facility that would likely be related to production space. It's kind of a to be determined. If we don't need the space, that's kind of where the contingency looks that we look at. If we don't need that space and if we're getting along just fine with the space that we have, we would be fine removing that northern part of the building and then giving it back to the city or selling it back to the city for whatever.
Give it was better.
Yeah, if we're given this, we'd be happy to give it away. But then allowing it to be redeveloped by someone else. So that way, we're looking at this, we want it to be a win-win. It doesn't do us any good to sit there with a building that doesn't look nice. It doesn't do us any good to sit there and just hoard a piece of property. We'd rather have somebody next to us that's also going to attract people downtown. We'd rather have a vibrant neighborhood than just a big building, and that's kind of where we come from with that. As well, along those lines, I don't know if you guys know too much about me. I used to be on Plan Commission. I used to own the firehouse. We started that and rehabbed that building. I still own the property. My wife runs the business. But one of the things that I have been tapped and pulled into is this discussion of parking. And I'm so tired of talking about parking. It makes me numb with all the parking committee things that we do. But it's one of the things that I don't particularly care about this property is that if we do have to put a parking lot where we're currently proposing it, I think that's kind of a waste of space. I don't think that there should be a parking lot on the river. That said, there is, and this is just an idea that I'm throwing out, it's probably more for planning, but the lot that's to the west of this property that had some buildings that were demoed just this last year, I would be interested in moving our parking lot across the street and then having more developable land on the river. It's just such a waste to me to see a parking lot on the river that I'd much rather see a building, and I'd be much happier having a parking lot on a lot that's not prime. So that's just me throwing that idea out there, but I guess we can see where that goes. So that's my quick little presentation. I also had, there's just a picture of what it could look like if in fact after we decide that we don't need that space. I believe the entire parcel is just under 3 acres. So if we didn't have that northern part of the building, it's just a little under 1 acre. It's hard to tell because of the angles that these satellite pictures are taken at, but there would be a good chunk of land there if we don't actually need it once the time comes, as well as that parking lot that I just mentioned. If that were to shift across the street, there's a lot of space. There's a lot of space between what would be us and then the building where Family Video is. So, like I said, we really want to stay in the neighborhood. We've gotten a lot of support from the neighborhood in the form of patronage, which is really great. A lot of the neighbors think that this is already a done deal. They're wondering when they're gonna be able to come over and check out the building. So we're excited about it, and like I said, we just got numbers back last week from Market and Johnson, and they all tie in nicely with where we're at. With like I said, we're looking at a $3 million investment in the first 3 years, and then if we do end up putting a structure on that northern part, it'd add another $2 to $3 million. So. Somewhere in the 5 to 6 range if we ended up actually developing the entire property. So that's all I have. If you have any questions for me.
Questions, anyone?
Right here.
In one of your earlier presentations, you made some comment about some of what you're doing needing federal approval. Would you refresh our memory on what that involves?
Correct. So the process that we would have to take, and we would build it in as a contingency, is that we would have to basically present to the TTB, they're the federal governing body that looks after us breweries that are just making poison and, dealing in these dangerous substances. We would have to submit to them the layout of the building, exactly where our tanks are going to be, where there's untaxed product, taxed product. They want to know the brands of the locks and the doors, if there are bars on the windows, who has keys, it's very in-depth. So we'd have to put together a package, submit it to them. I see no reason why we wouldn't be turned down. The biggest thing that they want to know is, are you taking care of the things you haven't paid your taxes on yet? And are you next door to a school? And we're not, so I don't see any issues with that. It's just it's a step that will take us up to 3 months to get the location approved. We'd also then have to go to the state and get that, but the state looks at the federal approval and then kind of goes from there.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, Mr. Glass, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
Because we were not able to get to the point of having a development agreement for you to review the terms and conditions, we won't need a closed session. So this next, staying in open session, having a motion on the 30-day request would be your next item.
Again, why we don't have a development agreement?
Because it took so long to get the contractor's dollar values back, so that he would have something to plug into development agreement and such, we weren't able to do that.
So we will not go into a closed session, and I know it will make our cameraman happy. So we have on the next item is to consider a motion for a 30-day extension. Board, what's your pleasure?
I'd move a 30-day extension.
Okay, it's been moved in second to approve a 30-day extension. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Schatz, do we have any other proposals at this point for this property?
No, there are no other proposals.
Thank you.
Further questions? Dave?
My question would be, so we don't have to do this again, is 30 days going to be enough time?
Steve.
It is enough if we have a proposal, and I guess depending what else I have coming in. So there is another major project, not in an RDA, that I expect to come in fairly soon. That would take a fair amount of my time, but really it's all, the clock starts when we have a proposal. So we don't, we've met a few times, but we don't have a proposal. This is the first time I've seen this one. So we'll need to get that formalized and then set up negotiation. It's optimistic. If the board was so inclined, 60 days wouldn't hurt my feeling.
Does the extension start at the end of the first 90 days, and when is that date?
Roughly it's right around this time, because it's 90 days from the day you approved it, which was the third week when our meeting is always held. So we're right at that 90-day period, give or take a day or two on how the months fall.
In light of that information and the fact that there's no one else negotiating out, I would like to amend this motion to be a 60-day extension.
Okay, Dale, you made the original motion. Do we have a motion to amend the motion?
I'll withdraw my motion and defer to Councilman Montgomery.
Dave?
And I'll move for a 60-day extension.
Okay. Can I get a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded several times. to make the extension 60 days for the Marine project. A discussion on that? Discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of a 60-day extension, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You've got 60 days. Thank you. Number 7, a presentation on draft redevelopment conceptual plan for the Cannery District. Michael?
Yes, I'll need to move to the computer to make this happen, I think, unless, do you have something, Phil?
No, I don't have.
Okay.
We'll give you time, Mike. Might be off screen for a moment.
So, as you probably remember, Ayers Associates is our consultant on that. They worked on the first phase, which was the public space and park space, and now they're working on the redevelopment half. So we've got our first draft of that and are looking for comments. We also ran it by Daryl Tufte in the planning department for comments too. So just wanted to show you where we're at, get some comments, and then it'll be tweaked from there. Phil?
Thank you. This will be a little back and forth because I want to be able to move around on the screen, and I don't think I can do that here, can I? I'll move back and forth. No, it's just a single slide. So there's some scrolling that's going to go on here. So what I'm showing you now is the southern portion. If I can I sit at the computer?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, there's a way.
I'll just wait. Yeah.
Today you're not going to find the mouse.
It's just scroll. Oh.
Well, let me just stand here if that's okay. What we've done is divided the Cannery District into 3 sections. One is the downtown Cannery District, the other is the uptown Cannery mixed-use development, and then the third one is the High Bridge neighborhood development. So within those, we've created a number of scenarios. What we present to you today is kind of the preliminary concept that we want to really start the discussion on. So basically, the southern or the downtown Cannery District is the mixed-use area of the property. We've got essentially the same placeholders that are there presently, showing the family video site, as well as the children's theater site. I'm sorry, I was just blanking out there. But we're also showing some redevelopment on the west side of the Oxford, where there would be a new development section there for commercial property, commercial office, or mixed use. We're also showing a commercial office space, which is just to the north of what would attach or be associated with the family video redevelopment or project site. Again, as Will mentioned before, parking is still up in the air. We're trying to develop what the strategies are before we start assigning the parking numbers in there. We've got some ideas of where it is. The primary thing on this site is that we're preserving or redeveloping property on the west side of the children's theater, all the way down on the back side of those buildings to create a parking corridor on the back side, but still keep the urban frontage on Oxford Street defining itself. one of the things that we wanted to do in the development was to create a sense of entrance. And so with that, we were looking at an area of just an overpass that could possibly connect to an upper level access from Maxon Street, or Cameron Street, I should say, that would allow access to the businesses and the mixed-use development there. But its intention is to create kind of a formal or a nice presentation to come into the district, alert people that you're entering into this new area, this redevelopment area. On the Uptown Cannery mixed-use district, we also had so the area to the south is primarily office and business redevelopment. The area to the north on the Uptown district is showing a mixed use of housing and senior housing and businesses on the lower levels. When we were at the public meeting at the Lazy Monk a while back, we got a really strong feeling that they don't want to be segregating the neighborhood, segregating housing types, that they want to have it incorporated into kind of a mix of housing types. And what we're trying to do is kind of progress north from a more high density to a lower density housing type. In these areas, we've got essentially the ability to continue this street forward as a business corridor, if that's the choice. There's other options with that. The street obviously turns here, but if you could come into this area as well, you could have some lower level mixed use going on. Upper level could be anything from housing, apartment type housing, senior housing, another housing type here, second level apartments and such. This would be a housing or fourplex complexes that would be essentially one story could be on First Street, and then the Second Street backside of that could be the under parking that could go along with the buildings, because there's quite a grade drop, all along this side. So a lot of these buildings would be tucked into that edge. You could use the setbacks of a central business district in this area, or you could use the setbacks that's more complementary to the residential districts in here. I think it's kind of more what you feel is the fit for that. This would be having more of an urban edge to it, such as it would be down to the south as well. This northern area is kind of where it starts blending into the public space more. What we've done in the prior plan, as you recall, was develop this corridor linkage from the north to the south. This area starts integrating into the public space. We see some senior housing potential in there. That would create some outdoor spaces associated with that. Adjacent to it would be the neighborhood park and some of the community park functions that would be on the lower side of that park development. On the High Bridge neighborhood development, we're looking at again a mix of patio homes or condos along the side of First Street. And this could be fourplexes along the west side of Second Street, or abutting Second Street. Again, that could have a different major mix. We've kind of duplicated some of the lot sizes that are present in the neighborhood and some of these placements of these buildings. And to the north, you can even see more distinctly what the lot sizes are. They're about 60 by 120, basically. What we're showing on the north side is kind of more complementary to the neighborhood. So there would be a potential for some single-family development there. There's also potential for multifamily development, but what we're showing is trying to get this diverse makeup of housing types, business types, commercial office types, that kind of create the widest range of potentials within this development. So all of this benefits from the proximity to the public space, which is always a good thing. Hard to see overall of the site. gives you the kind of breakdown of the areas relative to how they relate to each other. Mike and I have talked about this on a number of occasions. We're excited to come forward with this plan. Let me show you, I guess, one of the elements that I didn't mention earlier. This space in here, what we're suggesting, a number of things, is that this corner here is kind of a not the most pleasant experience coming into the site or moving around the site, but if that could be converted into some kind of green space or some kind of softened area, or I don't know, maybe some other possibilities in there, but then start developing the parking that's along on the west side of the site would kind of take the parking, the visible parking off of that corridor coming in. The other thing is down south of here, we haven't projected any other redevelopment than what's shown on presently on the site. But there's certainly some potential down there if you wanted to consider that. We have this parking lot shown in between there. That is the discussion yet, is how to do that. It's better to run it perpendicular than it is to run it parallel with the street. We're also looking to, in the northern sections, to maintain those view corridors, and we'd like to somehow maintain some kind of view connection, even though those streets are kind of two elevations, but a view connection to the business district or the cannery district.
So to be clear, if people are watching, that green space is just a concept on the Children's Theater's property. We have not talked to them. They may find it beneficial to have an outdoor space for outdoor activities too, but so anybody watching, anybody here in the room today, it's just a concept, nothing more.
Good point, Mike. Thanks.
I have a question.
Please.
The redevelopment authority's property is the bottom two rectangles, correct? Just the bottom two?
It's all three.
So our RDA property goes over?
No, those two to the west of First are city-owned parks, but if you remember all of our discussions and with Parks and Rec, they would trade those two to get into our area, into the RDA's area for their neighborhood park and community park.
Okay.
So the space we're showing there moves what they currently have into that park and into the RDA space and enhances their park space.
Thank you.
So just for everyone, show the specifics in the Uptown Cannery and the Downtown Cannery, what properties the RDA does own on those as we discuss this.
So it would be the purple dash around there is owned by the RDA, the purple. And then below it, the orangish red.
Well, it's within the district, some of the properties are home.
Oh, yes, yeah, up from Madison Street, we don't own those first two as you turn on to Oxford there. Yep, those two there. And so it starts right behind.
Family Video and the Quick Trip, we do not own.
We do not
own
we do not own. So we would start behind. The district actually starts right where that Phil is putting the arrow right now. And then north of the purple, if you can flip up there, that green space above the purple is all owned by the RDA too, going north along the river. Yep, to the bridge. So there's three sections there that are owned by the RDA. Park to the north. Oh, yes, yeah, where we used to dump the snow. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, but we've got a good outline of exactly what the RDA owns and what we can develop based on that, and so I think we're in good shape. Any comments, board members?
Thank you. In light of Audrey's presentation from the health impact assessment, I think that what Phil is proposing fits really well with one of the more important of the topics that will be addressed, and that's social cohesion. And that my take on that from our last meeting is it's kind of a catch-all descriptor that addresses crime, it addresses I guess the evolution of this community, not only from the standpoint of people within the area and within the community at large as they approach this development, but also the neighbors that are living in that neighborhood now. And the concern that was discussed is that we don't do something that violently disrupts and displaces the residents that are there, that they feel that this is their neighborhood and that they feel part of that. So,
Any other questions or comments? Jeff?
Phil, can you focus more on the economic cannery piece of it? There we go, centerpiece. I'm a little concerned. We've talked almost from the beginning about one of the principles, I think, that the RDA has held to get involved in these is there has to be some sort of greater public benefit to the clearing that goes on. You know, we're displacing existing businesses, and there's got to be a public purpose for that. And part of that has been to establish these kind of green belts along the river where we can. And Phoenix Park was an opportunity to do that. And this, I think, was another opportunity to do that. Now, the trail is there, but the trail is really, with all due respect, it's a great thing to have it, but it's moving people from A to B. What we had wanted was to make them stop, you know, bring something of an urban experience to it. I'm troubled by the amount of development on the east side of Oxford in the plan. You know, one of the great takeaways to me of Phoenix Park is that Riverview Terrace really became a demarcation point. You couldn't, the public had from the street to the river. And here, frankly, those parcels will go, I'm sure they'll go, and then it really turns the rest of it into just anything else, frankly. You got a lot going on. You're transitioning from a single family, single home, detached home neighborhood to fairly urban in about a block and a half. And a lot of the public green space, given the bank, is gone. You know, some of the early park plans that you showed us, that's all gone here. It's a neighborhood park to the north. You're essentially flipping to the river, but everything in that central area is gone. Mr. Glass is still in the room. My great concern, frankly, about the brew pub, how I have come to terms with that, is that too, to me, is a site that I had hoped would be public, that we would put the development across the street in some way. Now, a brew pub, I think, does bring people down in a way that may be different. You know, I applaud you for the outdoor spaces you're putting and trying to turn that into something more than just a place that's selling beer with trucks pulling up to the docks, because that's an industrial space. So I'm getting my head around that, but I really didn't envision everything to the north going to mixed use. Now, there's a practical concern too, in addition to the loss of the green space. I think mixed use is really tough to do up there. You know, I know what everybody's telling you at your focus groups, but the reality is it hasn't worked very well in other places we've developed. The commercial is a real challenge because the new construction puts the rents so high. And the second point is here, Oxford is essentially not a through street, it's dead end. Your traffic counts are not going to be high enough to support a lot of commercial development anyway. So we're chasing, I think, development that's going to be hard to get, and we're sacrificing a lot of green space to do it. And I'm uncomfortable with that mix. You know, and frankly, it's going to be other people, it's going to be a new redevelopment authority that does it, and most of us will be long gone by the time this comes to fruition. But I would just encourage looking again at whether that trade-off is an appropriate one. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Thank you. Other Tom?
I would just like to say that I concur with that opinion that we just heard from Mr. Halloran. That's all.
Can I ask a question about that, just to help clarify in our mind? In this area, are you looking at less building density and more park density in this park space in this area?
Well, you're pointing to the brew pub for those who are watching or in the audience. clearly that negotiation's going on with Mr. Glass, and he's sitting right behind you, and that will come to a conclusion one way or another. I hope he's successful, and if he's successful, I hope he in some way is thinking about and talking how that might relate to the spaces to the north, because there is an opportunity to do it. I had thought, though, that we would basically bring, I don't know if park is the right term, but it's more of a Phoenix Park type urban green space up to Oxford. Keep the development to the west of Oxford, not the east of Oxford, with the brew pub being an exception. And clearly the brew pub has something across the street. We've allowed the Children's Theater to be there as well. So you've got, use that east-west access point maybe as the other seal, but keep it parked to the north, at least between Oxford and the river. Because otherwise the bank, as I understand it, Phil, is so steep that it shows as a fairly significant green area. It really isn't a fairly significant green area. It's going to be like Bellinger. I mean, it's going to look like a commercial corridor. And that, to me, it's so hard to get these green areas along the river. I wouldn't do that. Just, again, that's asking a lot, I know, because that's suggesting that there's tax base there that's not going to happen. I think in reality it's going to be hard to make it happen. But I appreciate that's a harder path to take. But you just don't get many chances to keep that land public.
So when we made the presentation on the public spaces, we looked at these as being more nodes in that area, not so much the stopping points that you're suggesting, but great, thanks.
Just quickly, probably pointing out the obvious here, but we think about, again, our CU project in Phoenix Park, and we look at the need to generate value in this area. I suspect that by plan we just heard, by moving development to for those who are watching, I'm looking at the map of this in front of me. By moving the development to the other side of Oxford Street, I suspect that you're of course losing the value, like a lot of increment on the right-hand side of the street in terms of assessed value and all that, but you're going to pick up a tremendous amount on the other side of the street. And so the loss of value may not, almost certainly was not going to be anywhere near as great as it would be otherwise.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I agree with that. One of the takeaways that we learned, we were concerned when we gave up the development on the river side of down at Phoenix Park as well. But that did, in fact, transfer the value to the other side of the street, and I think probably you'll have to study that. So yeah, I think it probably pulled it further. I think it pulled it further from the river than it might have otherwise, and I think that could happen here too. This is a much narrower site, though, so no promises. But I just think, at least before we get the plan set in stone, I would feel better if we at least studied whether there's a way to keep some of that green.
Mike, would you do us a favor here, especially we've got a new member. Let's make sure to take a look at what Phil did before with the nodes and be able to compare it to this so that we could understand that. And then Phil, there's the grading issues. It's so hard to see it on a flat screen like this. The grading issues are huge in this area, so maybe make some comments on that when you're showing us when we can make some comparisons. But I think Jeff and Tom really hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. I'm really glad we had this discussion, and in fairness to Phil, this is a 360-degree change from the board. At our discussions last month, you were more worried about getting a $10 million building on the brewery project site and wanted that big development on there. So that feedback was given to Phil, so I'm glad we're discussing it and things have changed because we can show you those options.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of just the options. I think that we've got to balance the valuation with the green spaces, et cetera, as Jeff is talking about. So
yep, that's what we heard loud and clear last meeting.
Very good.
Somewhat following up on what Mike said, I mean, one, I think previous plans had shown development on the east of Oxford, but of course that's a policy decision that is one, the boards, and two councils, and will almost certainly evolve anyway because you can't tell you how many different versions, right, Mike? We went through on North Barstow before ultimately we've settled on what we now see. But whether there's anything to the east of Oxford or not. The other comment I would bring up to the board's attention and to Phil's is how we design Oxford north of Platt. So right now, I mean, that is largely a dead end. I mean, it almost looks like a large private drive. I mean, it's not. And I don't know the exact date, but I would put it roughly about maybe a decade ago or something we need to work on through engineering. But there was a city council public discussion of what the main thoroughfare through this area should be, and it was decided that it was 3rd. So there was some discussion of 1st Street, and it was decided to be 3rd. So certainly partially that impacts the turn and a little bit of that what is termed a public space. But you have that hard right angle right now coming from Oxford. At least if you're heading northbound, then it's a hard left onto Platt, exactly right there, and then out to 3rd. That's your main thoroughfare. Sort of the way at least this is roughly designed, it would look like Oxford would become part of the main thoroughfare, and it won't be for traffic. I'm not an engineer or designer, but one thing I at least toss out is, and working probably with Dave Solberg in engineering, is how can we make sure that it's clear that for most traffic it is a turn onto Platt and then through onto 3rd. But do you do a different paving? Do you do something that makes it maybe a pedestrian way that is an attractive downtown sort of commercial foot traffic, or something that differentiates it, that makes it attractive to want to go through there, but it's not the through traffic route. And I think so long as we're in that sort of chicane of a hard left and then a hard right as through traffic, you're going to have to do something engineering wise at that intersection to say, yes, we want you to come up here, especially if it is going to be 1st floor commercial, but we don't want you to just drive through there and think this is the way you get to Truax.
I would encourage you, though, to look at that and flow that through, because the development, the density that's shown in this plan to the north of Platt will, in fact, transform that into the through street. It has to. You're not going to get that dense a development if the traffic pattern essentially is making that a dead-end street. So something's got to give. Either you're going to have to reroute it, or you're going to have to back down the density in the plan anyway.
Yeah. Well, respectfully, maybe, but maybe not. I mean, look at North Barstow. Riverfront is not the clear-through street, but it has several $10 million plus developments on it.
Sure, but
Barstow to Madison is the main route through, but
it was visible, Steve.
Yeah,
that
clearly
was all
it's
a cleared site. That is not the case here. You've got single family on the other side of you. And very different. And the traffic count on Barstow is a lot better than it is on Oxford. So again, commercial space depends on traffic count. And you're not going to get it here.
And right, Riverfront is not for, it's office space and residential. It's not 1st floor commercial. And so again, that's something of whether we should consider that there if it's not going to be the main route through.
Okay, is that enough information and comments for you, Mike, Phil? Any other questions from your standpoint?
No, we'll come back with an alternative to this more high-density development and look at it as we talk today.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Thank you very much. Good conversation. Number 8, review of the city TIF policy, news to city TIF policy. Michael?
Jay is going to make that presentation. It was recently passed by the City Council, and because the RDA a lot of times also is working with TIFs too in their RDA districts, we thought it would be appropriate to go through that.
Thank you. All that talk about roundabouts earlier reminded me of, perhaps Jeff can remember back to his high school days, and Jeff and I were both involved in debate, and I went to Appleton East High School, and Appleton East had most of the classrooms were in a rotunda, and we used to very much enjoy people from out of town coming to Appleton, and they'd ask where a room was, and we'd say, oh, it's right down at the end of the hall. And about 5 minutes later, we'd see them come back and keep going around the rotunda.
For the record, that's how I met Jay. He sent me around, I think, it was at least an hour.
Yes. So anyway, as Mike mentioned, the City Council recently approved a policy on tax incremental financing, and it was the result of a number of internal discussions as well as feedback from developers, and just wanted to go through some of that policy with the RDA to kind of get you up to speed on what direction the City Council is thinking as far as both the creation of tax incremental financing districts as well as any assistance that might be provided to private developers. So the TIF policy is really intended as a framework for staff and City Council and also the development community for future decision-making regarding the creation of TIF districts as well as the potential for development assistance. It's designed to both be a tool to encourage new development as well as a tool to encourage the redevelopment of properties within Eau Claire. Just a little bit of information about the history of tax incremental financing districts in the city of Eau Claire. A total of 10 districts have been created in the city of Eau Claire. There was no TID number 1. Apparently that was going to be a downtown TID, but it was never actually created. So we actually started at TID number 2. So 5 of those districts have been closed at this point in time. We will also be closed, 5 districts have been closed. Of those districts, they had a average maximum life of 24 years and an average number of years that they were actually open of 14 years. So on average, we've closed our tax incremental districts 10 years before the maximum life. We currently have 5 districts open. Those are districts number 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And those have an average maximum life of 24 years, a combination of both 20-year TIDs, which are the mixed use and industrial TIDs, as well as the 27-year TIDs, which are the redevelopment TIDs. And those have an average number of years that they've been open of 8 at this point. I do expect that certainly TID number 7 will probably be a district that reaches its maximum life. TID number 7 is the Sioux Line redevelopment district in the Banbury Place area. I expect that that district will probably need to go out to its maximum life, but the others we'll have to wait and see. Number 8, it just depends upon what development we get on the liner site, as well as block number 7 and potentially the Riverside parking lot. As far as the creation of TIDs, the City Council wants to be proactive in the creation. That is, the City Council wants to, really to some extent be in the driver's seat of determining where development is going to occur within the community and use TIDs as a development tool to encourage development to occur in those locations. TIDs can be created in redevelopment areas, so those areas identified by and created by this body as redevelopment areas. It can be, TIDs can be created in what we're referring to as target areas. Those areas really have yet to be defined, but will be defined through the comprehensive plan and through the comprehensive planning process. Those are areas really where we want to encourage new development as well as encourage redevelopment. It's not necessarily restricted to areas of the downtown, could include areas such as North Hastings, could include sections of Claremont Avenue and the medical area, but again, those areas really haven't been defined at this point, but could include some of the older commercial areas that perhaps need a little bit of attention at this point. In order to create a TID, if it's developer initiated, we will need an initial project size of $10 million to create that TID, although that is a little bit of a soft $10 million. It could be less if the project accomplishes some substantial redevelopment or development goal of the city of Eau Claire. The intent of having a minimum initial project size is just that there is a certain amount of work that's involved in creating a TID. We want kind of that catalyst to kick off the district as opposed to creating new districts for smaller projects. Also, one of your esteemed colleagues here at the table authored a piece on a statistical assessment of Wisconsin's open tax increment district projects, and as part of that, one of the findings was that there seems to be some sort of a correlation between communities with a high percentage of their statutory debt issued, as well as the failure rate of TID districts within those areas. So we did include some limitations within the policy, which would reduce the amount of the city's equalized value that can be included within tax incremental districts as our percent of the statutory debt limit increases. So again, attempting to reduce basically the risk to the community as our debt as a percent of the statutory limit increases. Types of improvements or eligible project costs that we're looking at within tax incremental districts include what we're calling public improvements of a general public use. Examples of that would include a number of the things that we were talking about here this morning: public spaces, public parks, environmental remediation, recreational trails, public parking, and neighborhood revitalization. So many of those things that we talked about related to the cannery area would be types of project costs that would be eligible for payment through tax incremental financing. We also created a category that we're calling public improvements of development-specific use. These would include such things as utilities and roads, could include property acquisition, building demolition, where the properties are going to be transferred to a private developer, street lighting, traffic control, street landscaping, but really those types of improvements that a developer or development would otherwise have to pay oftentimes through a special assessment, but if they're being paid for through a TID, they're really offsetting those costs that would otherwise be incurred by the developer. And lastly, the last category is what we're calling cash grants to owners, developers, or lessees. And these might include such things as tenant build-out, building code or occupancy modifications, upgraded interior or exterior finishes, underground parking, and it could include project or equity financing. Some of the intention of this is getting at, especially with redevelopment projects, is getting at costs that a developer might incur for that project that they might not incur on a greenfield site. Again, for example, underground parking on a greenfield apartment project, surface level parking might be fine. They have the land to do that, but in a more urban dense setting such as downtown in a redevelopment project, and again, we were just talking about it with parking along the river, we might prefer to see underground parking. And with some of those types of preferences, those can increase development costs and may be appropriate to provide some development incentive to encourage those. And the previous two categories of eligible project costs would be available either in redevelopment or new development greenfield type projects, but the cash grants to the owners or lessees would only be available for redevelopment type projects, would not be available in a greenfield setting. Maximum assistance that the City Council is willing to provide is within a blight or a rehab district. We're looking at a maximum of 13 years for project costs, and then up to 2 additional years to capitalize a development fund. This is really looking to provide some additional funding for our economic development fund that Mike and his department administer. Within a industrial or mixed use TID, which has a 20-year life, we're looking at 8 years of tax increments for project costs as a maximum, and then again an additional 2 years to capitalize that development fund. Going back up to the first bullet on this slide is that all of these maximums are maximums, they're not entitlements, and the but-for test needs to be satisfied in order to provide any assistance. And what's meant by that is that but for or without the public assistance, the TIF assistance, the project would not proceed. So we need to go through a financial analysis in order to determine whether or not there actually is a project gap or a financing gap to the project, and we'd only authorize the assistance necessary to close that financing gap. So if that was, if it was a redevelopment project and our maximum is 13 years of assistance, but they only need what amounts to 8 years, that would be the maximum we would provide. We're not just automatically going up to the 13 years. And then minimum project sizes, as I indicated before, if it's a developer-initiated tax incremental district, the minimum initial project size would be $10 million. No minimum if the city's initiating the tax incremental district, and then a $5 million project size in an existing tax incremental district. So if we've already created the TID, and this is the second or the third project that might be coming into to the district, the minimum project size would be $5 million. And again, both of these minimum project sizes could be reduced if the proposed development is accomplishing some development or redevelopment goal of the city. And an example that we've used is, we've talked about downtown grocery stores. If a downtown grocery store was looking at locating, and maybe it doesn't have a value of $5 million, maybe it's something less than that, but that's a goal of the community, is getting a downtown grocery, we might consider that that sort of a project. And then lastly, within a development agreements that we negotiate, we do try to negotiate certain security provisions. First of all, within the development agreement, require a guarantee of assessed value. So within, the developer has to guarantee that their project will have a certain minimum assessed value. They also need to guarantee an annual tax payment, and if their value does not generate that tax payment for one reason or another, then they make what's basically a payment in lieu of taxes to make up that difference. The property will need to maintain its taxable status for a minimum of 50 years. Particularly in Eau Claire, this is somewhat of an issue with some of the housing developments that are student housing and could potentially be sold to or assumed by the university and become non-taxable at some point in time. City Council felt it was important to keep those on the tax roll for at least 50 years where public assistance is being provided. And then lastly, as far as security goes, we're looking to obtain either a mortgage on the project, some sort of personal guarantees, or other forms of collateral as may be appropriate with in a particular situation. So those are the highlights of the proposed, not proposed, of the adopted TIF policy by the City Council, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions from anyone? Good report, thank you. Any questions? Dale?
No questions, just a comment to say that we're pleased that we now have this policy. It provides nice guidance, not only for staff, but for the council and for the developers in the community that we work with. And certainly appreciate Jay's work on this, but it was also a collaborative approach with Mike and Steve and Daryl, and the council put two hard work sessions into pulling this together. So there was a lot of work that went into providing this guidance. We're hopeful that it provides that framework for future discussions. And then just to point out, and Jay touched on it, but using the TIF tool to provide some funding for that development fund will also potentially have some benefits for the Redevelopment Authority. As you know, we've struggled with funding our economic development initiatives. It's been from a fixed pot of, not fixed pot, but a fixed amount of money that came in the early 90s, and finding sustainable sources of funding for our redevelopment and development initiatives has been challenging. And so this is a tool that will help provide some of that stability going forward.
Good, thank you. Good work. Number 9, Executive Director's Report. Michael?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. That conference was canceled by Momentum, where we were going to go to Minnesota and talk to developers and show our redevelopment sites, so that was disappointing. We have roughly, I think, 2 sincere interests in Block 7 and the liner, so hopefully at a future date you'll see something on that. The city had a transit advisory committee report to them, and they designated 3 sites for RFPs. Later on, council also directed the city to start marketing the Railroad Street lot, which is a parking lot across from the new parking ramp. And then lastly, the closing of the Family Video property is that strip of land for the trail is scheduled for May 26th. And then I wanted to remind you that your June meeting is 1 week later. It is not the 18th, it is the June 22nd, I believe. Not the 15th, 1 week later. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Any announcements, directions, or correspondence? Any fan mail from anybody? No? Okay. Just sort of a summary then, where we'll get some information to the plans that Phil had shown us. We'll be able to get before the next meeting a look at the previous plans so that we could compare the way the 2 were developed. And that I'm assuming Mr. Glass will be back then at our July 20th meeting. That's 60 days, Michael? Because that's 2 meetings. So.
Yes, if needed, that's or before if we can pull it off.
Okay, all right. Any other issues to come before the board, Steve?
Just wanted to bring it up. I think we all knew what Mike meant, but some other ears might have heard it differently. So when he said closing of the Family Video site, that meant purchasing, of the easement site, which is east and towards the river of the existing Family Video store, which is continuing in operation.
Thank you, Councilor. Tom or David?
Thank you, Chair, Mr. Chair. I just want to add my voice to the issue regarding accessibility to the Cannery District. Jeff was initiated that conversation, which I appreciate. I was going to make some comment about street before Steve talked about 3rd Street becoming the main thoroughfare through that area. But the point I wanted to make was that accessibility is a key component to this development. And I think how those streets are laid out determines not only the social cohesion of that area, it also addresses property values, and it could be a major definition of where the public space is and how accessible it is, which is going to drive the value of the other developable properties. I think how we design that accessibility factor is going to be critical. And I think that we ought to pull out all the creative stops on that, whether it's going to be through laterals or however. And the lesson that we learned on a much smaller scale with Thorpe Drive down by the river just off of Summit, I think incorporating those kinds of design characteristics in a street that invites pedestrian activity could be a positive thing.
Okay, thanks very much. And I know we'll have an opportunity to draw a lot on those plans that Michael will send us for the next meeting, but thanks, David. Any other business to come before the board?
I'd like to invite something for a future agenda if we can. And with the change in the TIF policy, or the new TIF policy, I should say, and it's really addressing, I think, appropriately how economic development functions are paid for in the city, and that will be an important tool. We really haven't had that discussion at the Redevelopment Authority, though, in terms of how the Redevelopment Authority should build some of those costs in. The Redevelopment Authority is a little unusual of all these city commissions, unlike a plan commission or something. We are selling things, selling land, and we really don't have the Redevelopment Authority pay anything for that overhead. It's not built into the pricing. It's not anything, frankly. And, in the beginning, the city was doing it because it fostered city objectives, but at some point, I wonder if we might all sit down and see if some payment for the city services used by the Redevelopment Authority might be appropriate, and some of that built into the pricing. We now have enough volume of sales that are occurring here where that might be at least possible to do something. And I would at least welcome that discussion when the city thinks it's appropriate to have it.
Very good. Thank you. Any other items that anybody'd like to bring up? Okay, hearing none, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
Chippewa Valley Community Television and the City of Eau Claire present the Eau Claire Redevelopment Authority meeting.
The audio for this program can be heard on WRFP LP 101.9 FM.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And before we get into the agenda items, I want to thank Janine for her handling the last meeting. I'm a little concerned at how long it took. We'll work with her to move things along. And because we are on television now, when you do talk, try to hit your mic or keep it on. If you do keep it on, keep your comments quiet, if you would. Okay, minutes for the meeting of April 20th, 2016. It's in your packet. I know everyone has read it.